Hi, welcome to our September version of Transaction Review and Calculator Practice. These are my favorite events, and tonight I'm going to show you how not to buy a non-performing note. Not because it hasn't worked out really well so far, it's just that you, I probably no, not probably. I didn't really follow all of the established guidelines that all the non-performing guys do. And so this is something that if you were going to do this for your own account, I did this with my own money, not with another investor's money. So these are some learning curves I was willing to take and risks I was willing to take because it felt like the right thing to do and a good deal. So but anyway, I just thought this is something I recently did. It was, one of those virtual coffee calls that I had done. On one of those calls, a guy came on and he said, I've got this note that hasn't been performing for 10 months now and it's going to foreclosure next week. Do you want to buy it from me instead of me taking it to foreclosure? And I said, well, maybe. But, it's really out of my normal zone. I guess here's the deal. It was in Atlanta, Georgia, single family residence. After repaired value isn't super high. We're talking the 50,000-ish, maybe more, 60 or 70. Who knows, really, right? But I'm being conservative here. He bought it in 2010. And he didn't want to fix it up, so he sold it for 35,000. He probably picked it up for 25 or something like that. So he sold it for 35,000 as is to someone who would just move in and start fixing it up. But no down payment, zero down payment. And so the first note was the full purchase price, 35,000. That's 100% loan to value. Typically that's a no-no, but in this case he's like, I don't want to fix up that property. I just want to stick somebody in it as fast as I can. So I'm going to pull up the calculator here. So 35,000, and it was 12% interest only. So if we put PV here, 35,000, and if it's interest only, that means there's no amortization. The principal balance does not go down. So I can take this number, make it a negative, and say that's going to be the balloon. The future value is also going to be 35,000. The interest rate, 12%, and it was for 3 years. So 36 months. We can solve for payment here. So that's 350. And now you can notice the super easy way to do 12% interest only, or if it's interest only, you don't have to use a financial calculator, but if you did, this is what it looks like. Here's what I just do is 35,000 times 0.12, right? Carry the decimal 2 places, equals, that's 4,200 interest for the year. So if we divide by 12, because there's 12 months in a year, we get 350 a month. You can see you come to the same number. And just FYI, with 12%, it's always just going to be, basically moving the decimal place up. You move the decimal place over 2, so 35,000, move it over 2, so 350 is going to be the monthly payment. So if it was a $50,000 note, at 12% interest only, the payment's going to be 500. Super simple. Not for better or for worse. That's that. Now, just as a reference point, this property would rent somewhere between 800 and 900, and he's only paying 350 a month, interest only, to live there, plus taxes and insurance. So you can see that the monthly payment on the thing way below, way less than half, of what it costs to rent the same property. The maturity date, so he carried it back in 2010. The maturity date was last November 2013. And since that time, when the balloon came due and they hadn't come to an agreement on how that would be handled, the guy had quit paying. So that was about 8, 9, 10 months. 10 months of no payments when I became aware of this note that had, it was kind of an emergency situation. So just before I move on to the rest of the slides and discussing more of this, if this is an owner-occupant, now assuming that this was originated after January 10th, 2014, when Dodd-Frank went into effect. Can you see some glaring sorts of things? I mean, if it's an owner-occupant, I mean, the zero down payment is totally weird, but that's not a Dodd-Frank violation. Interest rate, I'm not sure what usury is, but that's pretty high for an owner-occupant. But look, it's still, he's able to occupy the property for less than half of the rent. But this balloon, Dodd-Frank does not like balloons for owner-occupants. So this would be something to think about. That's just something that should, trigger your awareness, something like that. So, high interest rate and a short-term balloon, not good for an owner-occupant. Although in this situation, maybe it was fair. But those are things I'm wondering about. But this whole note's falling apart anyway. Okay, so the maturity date, like I said, was last November. The note holder and payment, they tried to talk, but the note holder wanted him to come up with a lot more cash, like let's say $10,000 or $15,000 for him to modify the loan, the remainder of the loan. And the guy said, I can't do it. And they didn't believe each other, and their communication just sort of fell apart because they couldn't agree to the terms for a potential modification of the note. So when it came to me on a Thursday, the foreclosure was the next Tuesday. So there was like 2 or 3 business days before it was going to foreclosure and a weekend. And I said, well, so you're so close to foreclosure. I said, why don't you just take it all the way? I mean, why would you even try to sell the note at this point? He goes, well, I could, I can probably wholesale the property for $25,000, which is probably about what he bought it for in 2010. Here's the big ifs, it didn't take too long to evict the guy. What if he decided to be a jerk and wouldn't move out until the last possible minute? And what if he destroyed it on the way out? Then this $25,000 minus delinquent taxes is really all he would net, even if he doesn't mess it up. And if he messes it up, it might be worth $10,000. So anyway, there's a lot of ifs, right? Taking something. So he's just saying, I'd rather really just sell it and get out of it and not deal with that. So the UPB, this is a term that you should get familiar with. Unpaid principal balance is like what's still owed on the property. What's the balance of the note? So the unpaid principal balance, which is that basically $35,000 plus the back interest, the delinquent payments, plus the late charges and the back taxes, all came to about, and I'm rounding here just for simplicity, to $40,000. And he said, I'll take it. I'll take 20 for it. Or he wanted 25, and I said no. I offered 15, and he said no, I want 25. So we settled on 20,000. And I got the signed note purchase contract back from him on Thursday. And like I said, the foreclosure was set for the following Tuesday. And because we were in such a time crunch, I wired the money to the closing attorney on Friday, but I didn't even know if I was really going to buy the note. But I wanted to show the note seller that I wasn't jerking him around, that I was serious. So my money was just going to be sitting in the attorney's trust account, waiting for closing, subject to all the due diligence and things lining up. I said, but I tell you what, I need the weekend to talk to the payer because I can't pay $20,000 for this note if I'm not going to be able to get it reperforming because that price didn't make sense to me. So, but if I could get it performing and I needed the weekend, I said I will close on Monday, right? So I wired the money just to show I was serious. And the worst case scenario would be if I didn't end up closing, they'd wire me the money back. I'd have paid some wiring fees. I'd probably owe them a pain in the butt fee. So maybe it would cost me $150. And that was the downside if I ended up not buying the note. But I just decided to do, it's sort of Wild West-ish, shooting from the hip, but I'm just kind of like, hey, this is new. It seems reasonable that this could make sense. I'm just going to go for it. And, sometimes you just pull the trigger. And then if you're wrong about some things, you do make some mistakes, guess what? That's to me, that's how I learned, and I thought it was a reasonable risk. But anyway, so here's what happened. On Friday, I left one voice message and sent one email to the payer who hadn't paid for 10 months on Friday, and he called me right back. And he was very excited, but sort of not sure if he could trust it, because he said, I'm already resigned that I have to move out, after the foreclosure next week. But yes, 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 I really, really, really want to keep the house if I can. I just haven't thought that it was possible at all. The guy just wanted way more money than I really had. I have child support payments or $1,000 a month, and all these other debts I'm trying to pay off. And right now, I just don't have a ton of money. But I could pay you $2,200 this month, and then I can pay up just for the loan modification, right, to bring some of the arrears current, and I can afford up to $500 a month, and more after I get some of my debts paid off. I'll be able to start paying this down faster, and so I'm like, okay, maybe. So I'll show you in a minute how I crunched those numbers, but the thing was, he really, really did want to keep the property, and he was willing that weekend to pay me $700. But he asked me, ever since the foreclosure's been going on, I've been approached by lots of people, offering to buy the property, offering solutions of one kind or another. How do I really know who you are? How do I know you even own the note? And if I pay you the $700, that the foreclosure will really be canceled? And I go, you have a really good point. Because I said, even if I did have the assignment of the deed of trust recorded, you wouldn't even see it in public record for a few days at very best. So, you're actually going to have to take it on trust. And I said, all I'm asking is, take a few minutes and just check me out online and see what kind of reputation I have. This is the time is so short that's really all the time we have. And I don't blame you if you don't want to go for it, but see what you think. And he said, well, I actually already did it, and I've already checked you out, but this is really kind of weird. And I go, I know, it's kind of weird for me too. But anyway, so if that's how important like a reputation is that people will do things that they ordinarily wouldn't do if you have a good reputation of doing what you say when you say. And tried to do the right thing in the marketplace, even though, like, technically I did some things probably wrong in this transaction, technically wrong from the letter of the law standpoint. Anyway, he signed the note modification that I sent him, and because it's a note modification, that's considered a new note, even though it's modifying an old note that was first originated in 2010. The modifications after January 10th, 2014. So this modification is considered a new note that would be subject to Dodd-Frank. So technically, I should have insisted to and collect a 1003 loan questionnaire. What do you call it? Loan application to prove his debt to income. That he had the ability to pay on this thing. That's something I should have done that I didn't do. I took his word on what he told me he could afford. And I also know that it was still $300 to $400 below equivalent rent for that property. And anyway, he signed it, sent me the $700. On Sunday, I had a little PayPal email that says, you've received money from this guy, $700 is in your account. It's all good. And on Monday, since I had received those two things, this was his skin in the game to make me feel confident that I could pay $20,000 plus back taxes for this note because it was going to be performing. If it was a non-performing and I thought I'm just going to have to deal with the foreclosure, number one, I probably wouldn't have done it. Number two, I probably would have paid a lot less, maybe $10,000 for the note instead. So on Monday, I told the attorney, go ahead and process the note purchase. And the note holder that afternoon canceled the foreclosure that was scheduled for Tuesday. So everything was really, really tight. There wasn't either we were going to do this sort of shooting from the hip, Wild West style, or it really wasn't going to happen at all. So here's what we agreed to. Note purchase price $20,000. You can see plus he told me the back taxes were $1,900, and I go okay. So I was calculating an overall purchase of just under $22,000. And you can see that if he thought he could let's say he did take it through to foreclosure, and he could wholesale it for $25,000 minus back taxes and closing costs, he would have netted about the same, $20,000 to $22,000. And those are the big ifs, right? But here's another mistake I made, is I took his word that the back taxes were $1,900. When the attorney sent me the HUD-1 settlement statement, they were actually $2,700. So now, and instead of writing the contract to say, I'll pay you this much, but all the back taxes come out of your side of it, I didn't do that, which I should have done. I should have said, hey, I'll pay you $21,900 less any outstanding back taxes. Then this surprise $800 that hit me at the last minute would have come out of his side of the equation, because really it's his problem. He should have been paying those back taxes. It was his collateral the whole time. Anyway, but since I did it, I paid an extra $800 for this note that I didn't expect, but I had wired extra money. So luckily I had wired enough to more than cover this extra $800. So, you learn from your mistakes. Guess what? I won't do that again. Anyway, so here's what I'd paid: the $20,000 plus the $2,700 for the back taxes, because I don't want to leave these outstanding, because that's in front of me and threatens my position as a lien holder, mortgage holder. So I paid $22,700, and he paid me, remember, did I write it down? Okay, he gave me $700 that first Sunday, and he said within 8 days I can pay you another $1,500, which he did. So in total, he had $2,200 that he paid me right in that first week of us chatting. So I got that $2,200 back pretty much immediately. So really, my overall note purchase, what I had into this deal, was $20,500. I kind of wanted this to be lower, but this is just kind of how it worked out, and I just rolled with it. And here's the thing: even when things go bad, I don't go, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to execute or follow through, because I was surprised by this extra $800, and I thought this guy could put down at least $3,500, and he can only put $22,000. But I had committed, so guess what? That's part of just following through and doing what you say, and your reputation is going to either make you or break you. So I just kept going with it. And it's not like, oh, I found out that the property was burned to the ground, or I found out that he had an unperfected lien against the property and all sorts of title issues. So it was financial things. And so this is just part of the lumps you take, when you're in business. So anyway, after his $40,000, remember I said he owed about $40,000, the UPB at that point, with all the back things and penalties he owed, and minus the $2,200 he paid me right away. His note balance, his new note balance was $37,800. These are approximate. I think the numbers are a teeny bit different, but this is really pretty close. And I said I offered him two things, and we'll look at that in a minute. But he ended up picking this. Remember, he told me he could afford $500 a month. So I made it 10% interest, and in most states, this is well within usury. And I gave him an opportunity to fully amortize, so that at some point he could see he's going to own this note in the not too distant future. So I fully amortized over 120 months, which is 10 years. Now this future value, the balloon, there's going to be zero balloon, because this is fully amortizing. The loan will completely die by the time it's paid off. And so now $37,800, that's the present value or loan amount, and 10% interest, fully amortized over 10 years. Let's calculate the payment. And I had done some reverse engineering to know that this would come in right under his $500 a month that he could afford for principal and interest. So that's the one he chose. And now let's plug in what I actually paid. My net into it is 25, right? What I paid plus what he paid me right back. So this is what I paid for the note here. Now I want to calculate. So I paid 25 for the right to receive 120 payments of $499.53. So let's calculate for yield. I'll press it right now. So 27. So 27.25% interest, right? And so if this note performs, realistically, besides paying for 3 years, he doesn't have a ton of skin in the game, does he? He paid 0% down payment in 2010, and he's only come in with $2,200 right now, which is less than 10% of the note balance, right? That's why I was hoping he would come in with at least $3,500, so that's pretty close to 10% of the outstanding note balance, but that's just kind of what he had. And I told him, I said, look, do not tell me you're going to do anything you're not going to do. So do not commit to anything you can't execute on. And he did. He says, I won't. This is what I can afford. I promise you that I have this money and I'll pay you. And he did. He paid me exactly on the day the exact amount he promised. And and then he paid his first monthly payment September 1st online, right on schedule, just like he said. So I like this. I like attracting people who do what they say they're going to do, because that's how I do business. And so it's looking like, so for a performing note, if this stays performing, this is great, right? Making a nice return for the risk that I'm taking. I'm taking it for a ride. If he defaults, though, let's think about it. If it's only going to wholesale for 25 grand, I have a pretty high investment to value right here, don't I? Even though the loan balance is 20 or 40,000 ish or something, or 38,000, and that's a low percentage of the balance, but it's not that low compared to its all cash as is value right this second. So that's just a risk. I'm wide open, my eyes wide open, and I'm just going for it because of this guy's incentive and his emotional equity in the house and how eager and responsive he was over the weekend. I really wanted him to take this deal. I offered him this, and I would have preferred it, and you'll see why in a second. 37.8, remember? So let's put that back in. I offered him 9%, and this is what I wanted him to take. Why would you want him to take 9%? Wouldn't you want him to take 10%? Well, I offered him a 9% interest rate if he could fully amortize the note, because you never know if someone's telling you that's all they can afford. So I thought I would throw a carrot out there. Maybe he really can't afford more. If it's going to save him, over the term of the note, it'll save him maybe $20,000 or $18,000. I can't remember what it was, or maybe it was 12. Anyway, so I just wanted to see if he would bite on this. So it was a shorter term, and it was less interest rate, but the monthly payment was, what is that, $110 more? So it's not that much more, right? But it's more, but he just felt like, that would be stretching it. So when he didn't take this, even though even with the lower interest rate, I was pretty certain that he was being smart with his finances. I could be wrong about that. I don't know. But why would I have wanted this instead? Let's put my same $20,500 in there. Is what I paid for the note right here. And so now I paid 25 for 84 of these instead of 120 of the 499, right? So what's my yield? 31.5. So you can see that why it was a lower interest rate and there was less payments to receive. And I would have made 31.5 instead of 27.25. So what is that? 4 points more. Well, more money sooner is better. So that you can see that Me getting my money back sooner, see, 3 years sooner, increased my yield. And it also gives me safety faster, right? The faster something amortizes, the more protective equity I have with each monthly payment, and the more emotional equity and skin in the game the guy has. But anyway, he didn't choose that. Now, I did talk about Dodd-Frank. So here's what I should have done. If I would have had time to do everything right, I would have collected a 1003 and made sure he had the ability to pay this after expenses. I would want to make sure that this monthly payment plus taxes and insurance didn't exceed something like 40% of his gross income, something like that, right? Whatever the exact things are, I'm not sure, but I would have documented a reasonable thing. I didn't do that. You should do that if you were in this situation. The other thing is, I really shouldn't have contacted him at all. I am not used, now some of my performing notes go non-performing, but I haven't ever bought a note that was non-performing to begin with. Like, I've bought notes that have blown past their maturity date, but they're still paying every month, but I haven't ever bought one that was like in this situation, so it was new. And then there's this guy, he's just sort of been this chivalrous guy in the queendom, and he somehow is taking a liking to me, and he was on my last virtual coffee call, and he heard me say that I had bought this note and that I had contacted the borrower before I actually had the assignment, and he says, "You should never do that." And now this guy, Sir John, he calls himself Sir John, and he calls me the queen. He plays along with the whole note queen thing, and so he's my my noble Sir John, and I've knighted him a gallant, chivalrous knight of the queendom. Anyway, it's just sort of fun. But all he does is buy non-performing bank paper. That's what he invests in. But somehow he's just taken a liking to me, and he calls in and participates and sends me emails and feedback. And so when he heard me say that I bought a non-performing note, he's like, and that I had called, even though I sent the wire and had the contract, I still didn't have the assignment, right? The assignment wasn't like on its way to the county recorder right then. And he says, "Don't ever do that. I don't want you thrown in with all the other loonies just because even though you had good intentions, and this thing actually worked out, right? I mean, this was a last minute chance for this guy to keep his property and for me to get a good investment and the note seller to get out with a lot of headache. Everybody won. It was a win-win-win situation. But by Dodd-Frank and all the onerous regulation that's come down the pipeline, it was the wrong thing for me to do by the letter of the law, even though I feel like the spirit of the law was good, but I was willing to risk my own money and to do it and to learn by some of the mistakes that, I might make, which I did make some. Anyway, he says the devil is always in the details. However, when you're dealing with debts in default, you are a debt collector and subject to all the requirements, whether or not it was originated privately or by an institution. Some issues are, number one, if you do not have an assignment recorded or in process, you violate Truth in Lending Act, TILA. Number two, if you do not have an assignment and contact the borrower, you violate federal privacy laws. Number three, if you modify a loan, it is considered an origination, new terms and rates. If it was not done by a licensed originator, you violate RESPA and Dodd-Frank. There, I did that too. Number four, if you do not give the proper notices upon transfer, you violate TILA, RESPA, Dodd-Frank, and FDCPA, the Fair Debt Collecting Practices Act. I did that too. There was no time for all of the things. It was just one of those fly by the seat of your pants things. Number five, even the telephone calls violate the what is that one? I think it's the Consumer Protection Act, since you are collecting a debt but without an assignment and have no standing to collect. I mean, my money was wired and I had a contract, but he's right. Like, the assignment had not been even executed at that point. I think that was done on Monday. The primary issue is that all of these statutes carry a private right of action, meaning the borrower can sue directly. They also carry governmental right of action. The CFPB, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, or state attorney general or some other agency can bring charges and or levy fines. The monetary issue is that all of the statutes carry actual damages, which can be the value of the property and who knows whatever else, emotional distress. It is not that an effort was made to save the home, but that you initiated the effort. If any loan servicer could have, their attorney could have, the foreclosure attorney could have, the owner could have, without an issue. But he's just saying you, as the prospective note buyer, had no right to contact this guy. And, he says, my best, Sir John. And I really appreciate this. So obviously, that's why I titled this How Not to Buy a Non-Performing Note. In some ways, I'm super glad that he told me this. Now, this is good. I already knew some of these things, and I didn't know the details because I don't buy a lot of non-performing notes, but this one just felt right in my gut, and it was the only way to get it done, which I thought was the win-win-win. So I just went for it. But you can see that I flew in the face of prudence and the letter of the law, and I was willing to do this. And I think that guy is super happy. And at this point, I'm super happy because so far it's going along just fine. And I feel good that that the private sector, as private persons, we were able to work something out where it didn't have to go to someone losing his home. So anyway, that's my story for today. Not even sure if I should be that transparent, but sometimes the best way to learn is through your mistakes. And you can see that part of what I do, sometimes I make mistakes, but then other times it's just that energy of being willing to just pull the trigger and do something. Calculating the risks, or at least the ones I was aware of, and just going for it. And there's something to be said for at least, just doing something, pulling the trigger and doing something. But anyway, I hope you found that helpful. As always, I appreciate you. Thank you for being here, for spending the time. And remember to discover your passion and to be a fool for love. All right, until next time, have a good night. Bye-bye.